Hi there. Let me begin by wishing you a warm welcome from us, CES. We're currently here at Christ Church in Sutton, who have kindly allowed us to film from within the church. We've just completed their lighting scheme. We're going to be talking about church lighting and the process from old to new. We'll start off by talking about the old form of lighting, the old technology and its limitations, and then quickly start talking about the LED era and the benefits that that now brings. We'll finish off later on by talking about the process of changing from old to new. And in the middle, we'll show you lots of photos and images of churches and some examples of the way that lighting can impact a place of worship. Firstly, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Ryan Slessenger. I'm the senior partner of CES, lighting and electrical specialists. And we've been serving churches with designing new lighting systems and installing them for the last 3 decades. Our aim is always to serve churches so that we can do our very best to help a church move from old to new. Now, some churches are rich in architecture and history. Some church buildings are used a lot for community activities. Some churches want to remain dark and have a sense of mystery and emphasis. And some, if not most, have limited funds. Some churches are opened by many different people, and simplicity of controls and being able to activate the lighting is fundamental to any lighting scheme. The key is to understand the challenges that each church has and then plan for the future. Let's start talking about the issues of old lighting. So before the LED era, LED lighting has only been around in the mainstream for the last 10 years. And it has really changed the game. And unless churches have had a new lighting scheme in the last 10 years, they're most likely illuminated by traditional light sources. We're now going to be talking about lighting technology, and I'm sure most of you are aware about a lot of the things that I'm going to say now, so I'll try and recap this section quickly. But if you've got an old lighting system, it'll likely be incandescent or halogen, metal halide or SON lamps or fluorescent lamps, and these have great limitations. I even went to a church the other day that's still using gas and having a flame to light the church. But with all these forms of technology, there are often limitations. I mean, if it's a fluorescent or a metal halide fitting, their appearance is often industrial. There's dimming limitations, flickering, and the colour rendering and the quality of light is poor. So LED is now the standard for new lighting. When it comes to maintenance, especially if you've got a very tall church like here at Sutton, maintenance is very difficult. It can only be done on a motorised access platform or by a mobile tower. And that creates a difficulty in getting into these historic buildings, or even if it's a modern new build. So maintenance is a key factor. And a lot of the older technology require a lot more maintenance than you do now in an LED era. Life expectancy of these fittings are low. For example, a lot of the incandescent fittings only have a life expectancy of 2,000 hours compared to the 50,000 or 100,000 that we're now getting from LED. Parts and replacements becoming hard to get hold of. And a lot of these fittings are actually becoming obsolete and having to be taken off and new fittings put in. And the LED era is far superior. It's not that you've got a fitting with a lamp that you take out and you put in when it fails, like in the old forms of technology. The LED is a solid state piece of electronics. Then you get mounted up at high level and it's far more reliable. You have to think of it in regards to having an iPad mounted up at high level or a TV. It's that sort of electronic component that's there, and it's so much more reliable. So if you had 50 or 100 of these within the building, some are going to fail earlier than others, so there will always still be maintenance, but in a much less ratio than compared to the failures we were seeing on the old technology. So the fitting has to come down and be repaired and put back up again. And now I want to talk about running costs. There's a big difference between a halogen system and an LED system. For example, here at Christ Church Sutton, the church was lit by linear halogen fittings and halogen spotlights, lighting up the areas where I'm speaking now. And the electrical demand on the system was really high. The church wanted to put a kitchenette down the back corner, wanted to have a kettle and dishwasher and other things to make their after service a bit more enjoyable than walking over to a hall. So they looked at whether or not they could do that with the electrical demand on the system. And they couldn't do it, they didn't have enough. So we were brought in to consider how to reduce the load of the church so that they could put in the kitchenette. And the big way they could do that is by changing the lighting.
And just using this one example here at Christchurch Sutton, the electrical consumption for the halogen lighting scheme was 14.1 kilowatts. That's approximately about 60 amps and cost the church over £1,000 per year when we estimated how many hours they use the system. The new LED system has completely reduced that. So the new LED system, the energy consumption is 2.6 kilowatts, which is approximately about 11 amps, saving them 50 amps so they can have that kitchenette. And that works out about £200 per year. So therefore there's over £800 a year saving in their electrical bills.
And now talking about preservation. What you might not be aware of is that the damage that the old forms of technology, especially halogen and tungsten, may cause to the historic fabric of a church. Each of these light sources, to one degree or another, produces harmful radiation that over time will degrade wall paintings, fabrics, art and documents. The on-screen graphic shows the spectrum of light that we humans can see. Anything outside of these boundaries is not required for us to see any better, but they will begin to deteriorate the fabric of a building. And we also need good distribution of these wavelengths in order to fully appreciate colour and vibrancy. Just to give you an example.
As you look at these ancient wall paintings, you can see that the black ink is very evident. These images were taken around 2 decades ago. Since then, halogen lights have been implemented to highlight these wall paintings. But as you can see on the photos that I took recently, the black ink has degraded. The painting has been damaged by the harmful rays of the halogen lights.
So as you can see, just in doing a small recap about old technology and new, LED technology is superior to the old forms. But there are some limitations, and careful selection and design is required to ensure that a conversion or a new installation is a success. I just want to talk a little bit about expectations. If you walk into a public space such as a mall or a supermarket, the lighting is extremely bright, and people have come to expect that in other buildings and other places, even in churches. And we need to remember that churches were once lit by either natural light or by gas or by oil, by flame. So lighting was much more subdued and people put up with that for a long period of time, but now the demand is much higher to try and mimic what's going on outside with bright lighting. Some of the expectations might be that church wants to be bright, to light every single nook and cranny and corner of the church to make it really bright, like a hall. That can be good for certain churches and certain applications, but often what it does is it just creates a flat light and become unatmospheric. Other churches want things to be a lot more subdued and softer, having areas of emphasis, areas of focus, or trying to create a more reflective environment. So a lighting design has to think about all these different things for the concerts, for the Christmas services, for the community events, also for evening prayer, intimate services within a chapel. So as lighting designers, we have the responsibility to work with each church party, and it's key that we work with you and to develop the most appropriate scheme so that clients are ultimately satisfied at the end result. And now we're going to show you some case studies of some of the churches which have had new LED lighting introduced. And as lighting designers, it's important that we look at things like natural light. How does natural light play a role within a building? Whether it's an old building or a new building, natural light still has its primary role. Also to think about researching maybe the historical forms of light that have been in that building previously. It may be that a wonderful pendant used to be introduced into a nave and at some point has been removed, and that pendant was right and appropriate that can come back in. Other times new lighting has come in, it's not appropriate and it gets moved out and we go down a different route. So understanding the history of what's been there previous and what's worked is important. Also to explore the contrast between light and darkness and how those two things play well together to bring a successful scheme, a speaker with a darker background or a font lit in a baptistry. But it is also important to have a good wide coverage of lighting for the larger events or the community events, so that everyone can see, read and congregate, and that the church feels vibrant. So these are some aspects, but things that are important to explore before a lighting scheme is introduced. The following case studies, we're just going to show you about 4 or 5 selection that we think might be helpful for you to see. But I just want to mention something on budget. Budget is really important. Some churches have such limited funds and their old system has failed and they need to put something in new, but they haven't got much money. So therefore, what we need to do is focus on getting as much lighting as we can in the building, more on products, less on process and labour. So careful design is needed for a low budget scheme. But low budgets are possible and we can meet those. But there are also projects which have got a higher budget. They want to do something elaborate. They're thinking about the future and the church as a community space and wanting to do things really well for concerts in the evening and uplight. So therefore the budget is bigger. And in those we need to spend a bit more time on process, making sure that the design is really good. There's demonstrations, there's consultation, so that the lighting scheme that gets installed in the end is successful for decades. And that the project's been great. So as you look through these pictures, you'll see that there are a variety of, some may seem high budget, some are lower budget, but budget is important. It's not, you can only do LED lighting schemes with a large budget. Budget is important. That's one thing that we always discuss with clients as we're looking through.
St. Matthias was opened in 1853 and designed by the architect William Butterfield. In its addition as a role as a functioning parish church, St. Matthias has developed an important role in supporting music and the creative arts as a venue to a wide variety of performances. And we were approached to design the lighting, including stage and production lighting, and improve the small power and socket outlets around the church. As the camera pans round, you will see the pendants hanging in between the arcades, and these were existing, but we refurbished them and went through a process of selecting the right shade so that the church could be met with good ambient lighting. And then we brought in other spotlights and other fittings to add to the ambient lights so that there was focus and the architecture was met. You can see now by the press of a button you can suddenly subdue the lighting and enhance the reredos and the crucifix and the east window and the tracery, so that there is focus for these evening events when they do have music and they do have performance there at the chancel. The aisles could be met softly and the window reveals can be highlighted. The organ pipes in the same manner. The baptistry has been met with very narrow beam spotlights to pick up the font and to pick up the vault ceiling above. Therefore, the lighting scheme is flexible. It can be nice and bright for Sunday morning services or for community events, or it could have this subdued lighting for an evening of reflection, for a Christmas services, or for the performances in which they hold there regularly. Our biggest challenge was to hide the cables. Every cable that was there previous was buried into the fabric, so we had to work hard with the architect so that the cables are not visible and hidden. One of the church's greatest features is the roof, and we've lit the clerestory windows, and the spill lighting that comes from those fixtures enhances this beautiful painted ceiling. St. James in Sussex Gardens. 20 years ago we designed a halogen system which was installed and successful. As with all halogen systems, due to the heat, the light fittings deteriorate, and a lot of these lamps have now become obsolete. Maintenance at the church was undesirable. Every 6 months they would need 3 engineers and a mobile tower to do the changes necessary. We were invited back this year to convert this entire system to LED. Not to change the design, but just to simply change the lamps and the drivers of all the fittings so that the church receive a new 5-year warranty LED system. The electrical bill has been reduced by a considerable amount, which brings the church saving each year. Despite being a large church, the conversion has only taken between 2 to 3 weeks. The church is open in the day if anyone wanted to visit and have a look around. Watford Methodist Church, it was a new build and completed in 2017, designed by Clegg Architects. CS worked with the architect's drawings to design the lighting for this new build. The church is defined by its open nature and clean aesthetic. The lighting aimed to complement this whilst bringing some traditional elements to the new build. A dramatic stained glass window faces the main road, and it was designed by British glass artist Mel Howes. The general lighting is created by simplistic yet substantial pendants which offer uplighting and downlighting. RGBW coloured lighting is incorporated to the dais and uplighting to generate a different ambience for services and events. So this lighting system is once again simple to control with single button presses to activate the white lighting, and the colour lighting has a separate colour wheel where the colour desired can simply be selected from a range. Miniature luminaires were designed to graze the glass cross over the altar, creating a cross of light acting as a backdrop to the services. And we would have been doing the church a disservice if we had not ensured that the lighting covered the stained glass window so that it can be visible at night and evident, and the window become a source of light itself. St. Peter's Church in Newdigate, Surrey. This historic village church is situated quite high up within a rural community. The clients of the church asked us to design a new interior and exterior lighting scheme, and they set us a budget. That was the difficulty for us, is making sure that we gave them something substantial for the budget allocated. The church also has a visitor sensor, so that when visitors enter into the church, a certain amount of light switches on for them for a set period of time. This is a great way for a church which is open during the day to have the lighting in the off when there isn't anybody in the church, but on when people are in there. This is a great way of reducing energy consumption. The floodlights outside are all about 12 watts each, so very low in their energy consumption. Each one has an anti-glare baffle so that it concentrates light onto the building and reduces obtrusive light and glare. The church can be seen from those in the village, but also for those in neighbouring villages who can see the spire from their house or from their journey.
Now I just want to talk about process. Most churches have to have approval to introduce a new LED lighting scheme. Some churches can make the decisions themselves, but not all churches, especially if they're listed, either have to go off and get faculty or from the Historical Churches Committee or from the Victorian Society or local planning. There's various other approval bodies as well. So the design and the documentation needs to be done in such a way so that the approval process is smooth. So us at CES, we work hard at generating documents which are suitable for those approval bodies so that the church don't have to generate too much documentation themselves. Some clients can understand why, question whether or not a lighting design process is required. Can't we just get a contractor in to put fittings on a wall? And that's true. Contractors can source fittings from a wholesaler or a supplier, and certainly it could be a really attractive cost. In our experience, we do see that often the fittings that are selected aren't really good for long-term use. Some schemes that have gone down that route have sort of backtracked after 5 years and then wanted to do something different, or other churches have failures of light fittings earlier on than expected and needing new fittings to go in that are of higher quality. The design route is more involved, more personal. We at CES follow the RIBA plan of works, which is a recognised programme for designing such a scheme. And at the very outset, things are discussed like the process, the programme, timeframes, budget. All these are discussed at the beginning before a design is developed. Often within that process, there are multiple site visits, sometimes more than others, a draft design, and then coming back and exploring it, a demonstration evening, these sort of things. It helps to walk along the journey with a church clientele party so that together with them you're investing in this new development of a new system. Once the design has been completed and the documents generated, they can then be sent off for approval. And soon after that process, it can go out to tender. So the design itself could then be taken out to competitive tenderers, so local contractors who might be able to bid, or people experienced with working in places of worship. We're quite strange in the industry because not only are we a design practice and design specifications, but we also have the install team. So sometimes there is an element of design and build, and often we're tendering for other works too. At the end of a design, we want the installation to be a success. We want to make sure we oversee that work so that whatever's in the design is implemented. We want it to be simple to use so that people who can come into a building don't feel they have to do anything technical to turn the lights on. They just can simply press on and off. But then other people in the church might want to have a wider use of the system so they could change the lighting for a different event or service. We want the lighting to be warm and inviting, not cold and industrial. We want it to be energy efficient, low maintenance, low in its running costs, and be successful for the future. Nearly all LED light fittings now and systems come with 5-year warranty, which is great for churches, knowing that they've got that initial peace of mind at the beginning of a project. And if something's lasted that long, there's a good chance that it's just going to keep lasting on and on. I think we're coming to the end now, but a design process may not always be the right route for a church. It could be that it really is just bringing some lighting to replace ones that are there, and things like that can be done on a quotation basis. But certainly all of this just needs to be discussed at the initial site visit. Well, that's the end of the seminar. I realise it's just a short overview of this topic, but I hope it's been helpful and beneficial, especially if you're going through this process at the moment. If you would like to find out more, please look at our website. The details are on the bottom of the screen, or email us or call us. We'll do our very best to advise and help you. Likewise, if you are in this process at the moment and would like a site visit, that's not a problem. I or some of my colleagues can come down and visit you at your church and look at your current system and just talk to you and work out what may be the best way forward. We do hope that you enjoyed the seminar and that you enjoy the rest of the Christian Resources exhibition. And thank you for tuning in.
Nothing beats sitting on it, hearing it, tasting it, wearing it, handling it, trying it, comparing it.
The copier produces 1,000 copies for £4. The Riso digital printer produces 1,000 copies for £1.20 at 140 pages per minute.
Discussing it,
The interesting thing about this centre is it's a very difficult breed on a very small site.
buying it, recommending it. I definitely recommend it.
It's always good to have resources, and this is very resourceful, so it's a great place to be.
Nothing beats being here. Buy your tickets online now. creonline.co.uk/tickets.